favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
We have an abstention. Consent agenda is approved. Okay. Study items. Standpoint Consultative Services, Dr. Jameson. Here.
So one of the items I'm presenting tonight is related to effective communication within the district, as well as looking at engagement strategies across all of our systems. And part of that includes how we foster buy-in and what support looks like. And with the level of systems change that we're experiencing right now, one of the things we wanted to look at is how do we improve communication so that we're ensuring that information is getting out to stakeholders and that we're using the correct channels as we seek to identify ways to improve our communication across our system and within our community. So as I looked at this particular item and looked at the connection to our MSIP standards, there are two pieces that come out. One around communication and the other is around communication within our crisis communication planning. And part of that includes ensuring that there is reliable, responsive, two-way communication with all stakeholders, in addition to developing a plan that identifies strategic communication means, which includes annually revisiting that communication plan. Currently, the district does not have a communication plan that's codified, but we do have different elements within our system. And so the aim right now is to explore different ways to identify a process so that we may improve communication across our systems. Some of those pieces include looking at how we disseminate and share evaluation metrics and data, also culture and climate information, in addition to other items related to our strategic planning process. So the administration looked at several different companies and their ability to meet the needs of the district based on those areas that were identified. The company that rose to the top was Standpoint Communications. On the screen, you can see their approach to planning and the elements that they look at. So while extensive, the pieces that stood out for us is looking at their SWOT analysis and how we might be able to use that information not only during our strategic planning process, but also as we look at other things that surface throughout the district as we try to improve communication across the board. And then they also help us to identify objectives as well as ways to help us identify and understand those things that are important to our stakeholders. Within this particular plan, there are several parts that are actually broken out as we look at identifying information that we want to have shared. And so a couple of the items that I want to pull out are around the communication program, the development of the program, as well as the execution, and then the strategic communication planning, and then also looking at crisis communication planning. Some of the items included in the proposal are non-germane to our district. For example, looking at the professional training for staff, they do have this outlined within the system, and then also surveys that will be disseminated. So we currently already disseminate surveys through the Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education for Culture and Climate. The Human Resources Department just distributed a survey as well, and then we also completed a survey through our communications department around how our families like to be communicated with. While the proposal is extensive, I believe that we are able to execute the plan with not all of the elements that are included in the proposal that they identified. So the key elements that I feel will help us as a district to move forward are, one, the crisis communication planning for varying formats using the information that was included at the top of the plan. The other part is around communication planning, and that includes strategic planning and the execution of recommendation to the board is to cap the request for support around the areas I identified to not exceed $15,000, which would include support from Standpoint and also collaboration with our internal communications department. So I will pause and answer any questions that the board may have about this particular item.
Thank you, Dr. Jameson. I have a couple, hopefully I can sort them out. First of all, is this a new budget item, or is this something that's in our budget that we haven't availed ourselves over the past couple of years?
So when we initially did the planning for strategic planning, the budgeted item that was included was in excess, and so because we were able to work with the company and pay the initial funds through Insight, we actually did not pay them as much. And so while it is a new item, there was money allocated last year that supported strategic planning. So it's not new, it's just looking at how we're moving those funds to support an area that is an area of growth for us.
And this speaks to not only external communication, the district with the community, but does it also speak to the communication within the buildings and across the district?
It does, and that's one of the pieces that we are looking to improve. I did have a conversation with our MSTA reps. I do have a meeting scheduled with our MEA rep to talk about how we communicate information to ensure that we're continuing to be transparent and that all of our stakeholders have all of the same information so that they are aware, which helps with the buy-in from some of the changes that we're trying to make, as well as support around decisions that may surface in the future.
So I really appreciate the thoroughness of this. I'm just wondering if they were able to cite any examples of other school districts that they work with, because I did try to just do a quick Google on them, and I saw that they did case study, but they didn't acknowledge who their clients were.
I can pull some of that information back. I do know they're currently working with some of the charter schools. One of them is actually Confluence Academy, and then they also do support some with St. Louis Public Schools around some smaller projects.
And then how many other firms did we solicit?
We actually looked at 3 others.
Any other questions? Are we voting on that tonight?
This item is being recommended to come back so that we would have time to plan in preparation for January.
Okay, great. Fiscal year 22 audit report and audited financial statements.
Okay, so every year, the district is required to get an independent audit, and the audit process is long and arduous, but our auditing firm, our CPA firm, Kerber, Eck, and Brackle, make it relatively painless for us. The audit begins, the first round of that is usually right around the start of school, so good timing on that. And then the last part of it is right near the end of the first quarter, so also great timing. But this year was, I think, a little bit extra challenging just because of all the additional federal funding that we've been receiving over the last few years. Added another component, the single audit, to this particular fiscal year audit. But I believe that Gina Cochran will do a good job of walking us through their findings.
You want me to stand or sit?
You come up to the thing there if you don't mind.
Okay, great. So we can all sounds great.
So I'm just going to give a real high-level overview of the financial statements. I am a partner with KEB, and I took over for Brian Wirtz, who's a partner in charge of our St. Louis group of offices. He just decided to kind of pull away from some of the audits that he was on just because he's overwhelmed with his responsibility of our 4 offices in the greater East St. Louis, or St. Louis area. So just a high-level overview of your audit for June 30th of 2022. So just to remind you all that management is responsible for the preparation of your financial statements in accordance with the modified cash basis of accounting. And our responsibility is to express an opinion on those financial statements. Your audit was performed in accordance with generally accepted accounting standards, governmental auditing standards, and uniform guidance related to that single audit and those federal funds that Chris mentioned. We issued an unmodified opinion on your financial statements. That seems a little scary, but it's really a clean opinion, and it's the best of 3 that we can issue. So that's what you want from us. No material weaknesses noted in your internal controls over those financial reporting, and no non-compliance with laws, regulations, contracts, and grant agreements that would be material to your overall financial statements. So great things there. This next slide is related to your federal awards. And we tested as a major program the education stabilization funding this year, those ESSER funds that were expended in accordance with uniform guidance. And again, we issued an unmodified or clean opinion on those major programs. No material weaknesses in internal controls over that major program, and no audit findings that were required under the uniform guidance. Then we also do a state compliance, your Schedule of Select Statistics, and that is in accordance with requirements of the Missouri laws and regulations regarding your budgetary disbursement procedures, your attendance, and your transportation. And that is performed in accordance with attestation standards established by the AICPA. Again, we issued an unmodified opinion on those compliance requirements. These last couple of slides go over some additional required communication with the board. And we're just required to point out that your significant accounting policies are in Note A to your financial statements. One of the biggest ones relates to the modified cash basis of accounting. That's actually drawn out and pinpointed in our audit opinion also that is the basis used for your financial statements. There were no new accounting policies adopted during the year, and the application of the policies have not changed over the past years. So when you're comparing these financial statements this year to last year, it's apples to apples there. No transactions that lacked authoritative guidance or consistency, and all disclosures are neutral, consistent, and clear. No difficulties in performing our audit. Chris and Rebecca were very responsive to us, and we appreciate everything that they do for us in terms of the audit. No difficulties encountered in performing that audit, and no disagreements with management. And also a new requirement this year is to let you know that we did comply with all of our relevant ethical requirements to be independent of not only the board, but also management of the school district. The top of this slide is one additional new standard that we have to report to all audits this year, and it relates to significant risks requiring special consideration. If you had 3 or 4 items here, that would be a concern. The one that we've listed is management override of controls. It's a required item for every single audit under our professional standards. So regardless of how many people you have involved and how good your controls are operating, we still have to consider that as a risk factor in our audit. And all audits have to be performed independently and different than every other audit. So we can't go in and audit your school district just like we audit every other school district because we're not looking at risks. So that is nothing that you need to take action against. It's just something that we have to inform you of. No financial statement misstatements, which again, that's what you want to hear. Chris is doing a great job, he and Rebecca. And they provided us with a management representation letter when the financial statements were approved by management, indicating that they had provided us with all of the financial information in terms of numbers and all information that needed to be disclosed to keep your financial statements complete and accurate. To our knowledge, no consultations with other independent accountants related to complex or controversial issues because there were none in the current year. That is it. So Chris wanted to thank you for your assistance, and please pass that on to Rebecca, and also to thank the Board of Education for having us perform the audit again this year. We appreciate you engaging us, and look forward to working with you in the future. Any questions? All good things, that's what you want to hear, right?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
Construction change orders. Chris?
Okay, let me shift gears here. There's really nothing to display. All the change order information's been communicated to you previously, but just for a brief summary, change orders 26 and 27 represent changes to the contract, the construction contract related to boiler plumbing, overtime, changes to some ceilings and some select restrooms, remediation of the soils out here for Building A, building permits, some changes we discovered with door hardware needed for door hardware and access controls, some of which was in response to recent events around town and some additional security measures that we're taking here inside of our district. Also just some lighting and backfilling and soil remediations around the footings for Building A. So all pretty standard stuff. Any questions?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Admin communications, NSIP 6 update, Dr. Jameson.
So this is a new item that will be a reoccurring item on our board agenda, the Missouri School Improvement Program. This is state's accountability system, and it ensures that the board as well as administration has a comprehensive school improvement plan, that building leaders are looking at data and engaging their staff around instructional strategies, as well as engaging with the community and ensuring that our spaces are safe. And so each month you will see this item and new information will be reported. The state initially indicated that our culture and climate survey data will be back. It was supposed to be back last week. We were told the early part of this week, and so my aim was to give some preliminary updates to the board and also our community based on the feedback that we got from families, staff, and students. My hope is that we will have that information back before break in our next board meeting so that information can be shared out to our community. But this will be a reoccurring item, again, just as it needs to be transparent and ensure that our community has information that's relevant as we continue to move through the process. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Building goals update, Dr. Brower, Dr. Dietrich, Dr. Eagle, and Dr. Williams.
I'm going to actually start off by giving an introduction, which dovetails nicely from the input item that is being presented. So one of the pieces that has been changed in the MSIP 6 process is the engagement by the board. And so the board is to not only monitor the goals that are developed by schools, but ensure that they're being implemented at high level and that data is actually being analyzed. And so while I can provide updates and talk about the goals for each of the buildings, I thought it was more beneficial for those individuals to come forward and share their goals as well as the strategies that they are implementing throughout the year. They will come back and present to the board sometime in the spring with their third benchmark data to show how they're progressing. And then as we move forward with our accreditation data that comes from MSIP, we will also report that information so we can see the overall picture. For tonight's presentation, we are going to start with the middle school, and Dr. Dietrich is actually working on a expedition site, so he is going to be zooming in, and Dr. Maxwell will be also supporting. So I am going to share my screen here. Give me 1 second, Dr. Dietrich. Ready to go?
So I have the screen up in front of me, so I can see as well. Okay, or that works. All right. Well, thank you, Board of Education and community members who are there for having us this evening. Very excited as we've worked through this data. Dr. Maxwell and I and our counselors and our teachers, and just really appreciate the support as we've moved through this. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there this evening. I don't know if they told you, so we are in Jekyll Island, myself and a couple teachers from both MRH and Special School District, as we are having some planning sessions for our 8th grade expedition in May. So we actually just landed and got here about 20 minutes ago. So, but again, thank you for having us this evening. If we want to move, go ahead and move to slide 2. So we have 3 goals we're going to share with you this evening. One is an attendance goal, one is an academic goal, and one is a behavior goal. So the first one, the first thing I want to say is it's been just really exciting to see the changes that we're making in the building due to looking at this data. And more than that, it's been exciting to see how our students are reacting to these interventions. You know, every kid wants to come to school, I truly believe, and be successful. And they want supports put in place so that they can be successful. So for me, the most exciting part, and Dr. Maxwell and I have talked about this, is how the students have been responding to the resources that we've been putting in front of them, the action steps. So the first one is our attendance and our theory of change. So if we create the expectations and conditions for students to attend and have a sense of belonging at MRHMS, we'll see an increase in full day attendance and a decrease in the difference for period attendance and full day attendance rate for all students. So what that means is we want to make sure students are here, but that's so that they're here all day. So if you look at goal number 1, by the end of the 22-23 academic year, we'll see an increase in our proportional attendance and to 80% based on reportable DESE attendance. And to give you an idea, last year we were at 65.2%. And then goal number 2, has anybody else gone and explained what proportional attendance is, Dr. Jameson, or do I need to do that?
You're first.
Okay, then I will get it out of the way for everyone. So I will tell you what I know, and then the real expert in the room, I don't know if Rachel Ward is there or not, but she's the one who's really mentored and coached me through this. But basically, each individual student gets a score or points based on their individual attendance percent. So if they are 0 to 84.9%, they get 0 points. If it's 85 to, I think it's 87.4, 87.5, it's 0.25 points. And then if they're between that 87.5 and 89.9, they're worth a half a point. And if they're over 90%, they get 1 point. So then we add all of those up at the end of the year. And those are weighted as well. So if a kid's only here a half a year, it only counts towards they only count towards half towards that attendance total. But basically we take all those points, we add them up, we divide them by the amount of students that we have. And again, that is weighted. And then we end up getting a score on that of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then goal number 2, by the end of the 22-23 academic year, we'll have less than a 5% difference of period attendance and full day attendance. And then we've got some graphs here to walk you through that. If you want to go ahead to the next slide. So our action steps, I'm not going to read through every single one of those, but we've got a lot of things going on. Our counselors, our teachers, Dr. Maxwell, myself, we've all been meeting with students. We've created action plans. We've created groups around attendance. And it's really kind of been all hands on deck, making sure that we're reaching students and making sure that we're getting them here to school. Anything from, you know, us taking part of our building budget to buy alarm clocks to students having our cell numbers and they're calling us when they miss the bus and we're going and picking them up, to just sitting down and having conversations and figuring out why students are late or why aren't they coming to school. But a lot of action steps that there. So this is our proportional attendance. So we set a goal this year of 80%, and that's a big jump. If you think about last year, we were 65.2%. So 65.2% of our students had 90% attendance or better. So we're really pushing this. And if you want to go ahead to the next one, this will kind of frame it up. So currently, last year, 21-22, we were at 65.2, so we would have earned 0 points last year towards MSEP. Currently, we would be earning 2 points towards MSEP with an 80.01. So we don't have a lot of room to move right now. We only need to go up. And we're going to keep working hard to get those numbers up. If we were to jump an additional 5 points, but again, I really want to stress jumping 15 points in 1 year, especially when we're going through this the flu and these different illnesses that are knocking kids out right now, because basically they can miss 1 day every 2 weeks if they're able to do that. So if they're out 3, 4, 5 days for this flu that's going around, it's going to take them 5 weeks of perfect attendance to make that up. And then partial points, if we get to 85, would be 3 points, and full MSEP 4 points. We would have every single student, and that would be at 90%. So we talked about the difference between full day attendance rate and period attendance rate. So the full day attendance rate is we have students here a full day. The period attendance is they're here at some point throughout that day. And there's tardies figured in there, and it's pretty complex when you get into it. Again, I'm thankful that I've got Rachel to call anytime I have questions on that. But you can see that there's a large discrepancy there for our Black students. Most of our groups were between 5 and 7%. Our Black students were about 10%. So we talked about what universals we can put in place so that we make sure we're reaching those students. And if you looked at our attendance and looked at the majority of our attendance concerns, a lot of them were our students of color. So if that's the case, we need to be intentional about where we're directing our resources. So you can go ahead to the next one. So this is what we're excited about. If you see, like, August, September is when this we started to realize that this is happening. October, we're writing a plan, and how are we going to address this? And the data we're really excited about because it's showing that we're closing that gap. So if you look at November and then December, we've looked at it preliminary, but we're only halfway through the month. That gap is closing, and we're really excited about that. And the really awesome part is when you talk about universals and you target those towards the most disadvantaged or the students that are struggling the most in a certain area, typically those universals will work across the board. It's kind of a byproduct of helping all the other groups. And you'll see that as Dr. Jameson scrolls through these, we have closed the gap for every single one of our groups that's reportable to DESE. And we want to make sure that we're continuing that. So I'm going to go ahead and hand over the academic theory of change. I think my wonderful assistant principal, Dr. Maxwell, is there in person. And I'm going to turn the academic theory of change over to him.
Hello, good evening. As Dr. Dietrich said, I'm Craig Maxwell, assistant principal. I'm not in the tropicals area with Dr. Dietrich. I'm here in person. So, but happy to be sharing just our second major area of focus, which is our academic focus here. And as you can see, our theory of change is that if we focus on emotional, behavioral, and cognitive engagement in all classrooms, we'll see an increase in academic growth for all learners. So when we talk about those three areas, our emotional area that we focus on is really kind of creating those conditions that students feel safe, comfortable, and ready to learn when they walk into our classrooms. Behavioral is really creating those habits and those tools that they need to be able to be successful in the classroom. And then the cognitive engagement is really when students are actively cognitively engaged in the learning. So our goal for this year is by the end of this year, we will see a 10% decrease in the number of students in our low and low average area for our assessment, which is the NWEA data in all 4 areas of language, reading, math, and science. The action steps, we have several different action steps within each of these areas. So again, for our emotional engagement, to create those conditions so students feel safe and ready to learn, we are making sure that our teachers are doing check-ins with students, so kind of doing some social emotional check-in each day and each period so that we kind of just see where our students are. so that we can kind of gauge where they are and what they might need for that class period. We also have some students that are maybe in more of our tier 2 or tier 3 supports that need maybe some extra support with that. Our counselors and social workers, they are running some student groups. We've also partnered with several outside organizations like Youth in Need, Love Project, CHADS, to also provide some additional small groups for our students to provide that additional support. And then to make sure that all of our students are getting some of these social emotional skills, we are using our Second Steps lessons in our advisory and in some of our classes as well, and that's our social emotional program and curriculum for our students. For our behavioral engagement, we're really focusing on that PLC and MTSS, a multi-tiered system of support process, where we have kind of determined the functions for students preventing students from success. So we're trying to find out what are some of the tools that maybe students are lacking, some of the skills that students are lacking that prevent them from having those habits and academic behaviors to help them be successful. We did a full cycle at the beginning of the year just focused on organizational skills for our students. We want to make sure that they do have those tools so they can be organized with their learning. So some of the work that we did was really focused on getting our students into the habit of using a digital planner or using a planner that they have. And then we're also just helping them just with organization as far as the time management, as well as keeping up with just their homework and academic studies with that. We do have, again, some additional support for students that might need more of that. We have an organizational skills group where some of our teachers use some of their intervention time to work individually with students, again, working on just kind of building those habits that they might need to be successful in the classroom. For our cognitive engagement, this is really going to be our focus going forward for the rest of the year. We did some just data collection, obviously used our NWEA data to see that we needed to provide some more just cognitive engagement for our students. And then we did some just observational data collection within our classrooms, really looking at just the amount of teacher talk versus student talk, looking at how often Kagan strategies are used, and looking at just how often and which students are cognitively engaged in the classrooms. So we're taking that data that we've been collecting here throughout December, and that'll kind of give us our focus areas for what we need to be working on with professional development moving into the second half of the year. We'll also continue to measure this by looking at our NWEA in those 4 areas that we have with that. That'll help kind of guide our PLC work that we're doing with our staff to really dig into what are some of the focus areas within those different NWEA assessment areas that we need to focus on with our students with that too. To kind of just show you the data, this is kind of some odd looking data just because this is the first year of taking the NWEA data, so we don't kind of have longitudinal data yet. So this is really just the beginning of where we are and showing where we want to be. So looking at where we are with our 7th graders, these are the 4 assessment areas of language, reading, math, and science. And what we have in the blue that's the percentage of students that are in the low and low average range. And you see that we want to decrease that by at least 10% in each of those areas. We will take the NWEA, we took it in the fall, so right at the beginning of the year. We'll take it again in the winter, so when we get into January, and then we'll take it again in the spring. So that's what we want to see see that percentage decrease in those 2 lower areas. And then the same thing for 8th grade. Again, that 10% decrease in all 4 of those areas is what we'd like to see. And I will turn it back over to Dr. Dietrich for our behavior focus.
Hi. Back to me? Okay. It was muted, so I wasn't able to hear Dr. Maxwell, but I'm sure he did a fine job. No, that's okay. No worries. Good thing is that we record these meetings, so I can go back and see it. So the behavior theory of change. So we always just talk about those theory of change, those if-then. So if this happens, then we expect this. So if we focus on restorative practices and creating opportunities for reflection of choices and conversations to repair harm, we will see an improvement in student choices. So one of the big things we talk about is, there's always this conversation about what are the consequences? What are the consequences? And we really try to get away from that. And we talk about what is the accountability? right? Because in the end, that's what we want to do, is we want to hold people accountable for their actions, but also repair any harm that was done. So goal number 1, by the conclusion of the 22-23 academic year, we'll see a decrease in the number of incidents that result in loss of instructional time. So we think about that. What is the main reason we have students at school? It's to work on academics. So by 15% compared to the 21-22 academic year, and just for a little bit of, so that you know, we had 20 incidents of out-of-school suspension and 52 incidents resulting in ISS in 21-22. The reason why we use the term ISS is that's how it's reportable to DESE. When we talk to students about that, we actually call it Blue Devil Etiquette, or BDE, because the idea is we don't want them thinking about that as a punishment. We want them thinking about that as it's an opportunity to go and reflect on that choice or that decision that they made, and how do we bring them back into with the rest of the students and repairing any harm that they did. And then goal number 2, by the conclusion of the 22-23 academic year, we'll see a decrease in the disproportionate loss of instructional loss for Black students by 20%. We're going to own that data. We know that in the past we've disproportionately placed our Black students or students of color in ISS at a greater rate. And that's something that we are really paying close attention to this year. So our action steps, I'll walk through a couple of these real quick. The biggest thing is just direct teaching, and it really falls on all of us. So, and not being reactive to everything. So the district has been very supportive and went out and purchased second steps for the middle school. And we're actually using that at the elementary as well. But actually direct teaching social emotional learning, and we're doing that through advisory. And actually our 8th grade has started piloting doing that in some of the 8th grade social studies as well, as it connects with our curriculum. But then using the restorative practices and targeted and proactive positive communication with students around positive behaviors, and monitor progress and connect families with need-based resources. So we brought in Youth in Need, My Brother's Keeper, Love Project, Chad's Coalition. All of these are very high quality organizations that we have brought in to work with our students and alongside our counselors and our social workers. And then just different strategies of, are we student conferencing, morning check-ins, daily reviews. Every morning we have different students who are reporting into Dr. Maxwell and I, and also other teachers who don't have a first hour period. They also have some students reporting to them just so we can get them started on the right foot. And then lastly, probably our most intensive intervention that we have is our life skills and coping strategies class by Mr. Williams and Miss Lee. And we're very excited. They actually promoted 3 out of 5 of the students that were in that class promoted out already. And we actually wanted to promote 4 out of 5 out of that class. They're doing great work. And one of them came to us and said, hey, I really appreciate you wanting to move me out, but I really, there's some safety there and there's some comfort there, and I'm making a lot of improvements and I want to continue it for 1 more quarter. And I think that's pretty amazing for a student to step up, use their voice like that. And as adults, we need to listen. So we did, and we're leaving that student there for now. So here's the number of referrals resulting in instructional time, and this is for everyone in our building. So this is September of 21-22 versus 22-23, right there where it says September. So you can see we are down in 22-23. October, we were up. We were up by 2 referrals. So not something that's overly concerning. And then in November, we were down again. So that's overall, if you're looking at our rate. So if you projected that out over the year, we would have a 16.5% improvement. So we're excited about that. That doesn't mean we stop the work that we're doing now. It means we need to continue it because it's making a difference. And we have some students who they know they're doing better in school because of some of the interventions we're doing, and they're excited about coming to school. And then just specifically, what does that data look like for our students of color or Black students? So total referrals for Black students is down. And if you project this out over the year, it'll be slightly less than what we had last year. And that's something that we need to continue in the future, or we need to look at in the future. What are those tier 1 interventions in class that we're doing so that we can reduce this rate? But that's not our goal right now. Well, it is one of our goals. It's not one that we're specifically targeting through these goals, but I still wanted to put it out there. But our goal, yeah, let's start. Number resulting in loss of instructional time. So that blue is 21, 22. That is for the entire year. If you look at the red, that is, we're just short of a half a year. So that is a great decrease that we're looking at for our students, our Black students in loss of instructional time, because we want them in the classroom. And then our average resulting, so our average percent, and we are right now, if you look at all of our incidents for Black students, we are 42% less likely this year to have a consequence or accountability placed that will cause a loss of instructional time. So very excited about that number, but we still have work to do. So I'm going to go ahead and go for a walk on the beach, and Dr. Maxwell can just take all the questions. So.
Are there any questions for Dr. Dietrich or Dr. Maxwell?
I do have a few questions, and these have been shared. Another board member asked along some questions she wanted me to ask. Dr. Dietrich, can you hear me?
Barely.
Can you hear me better now?
I can't look good. Yes, I think I can do it.
Okay. Well, let's start with the attendance data and the interventions that you've made to close the gap. I'm wondering specifically in your conversations with students and their families if you've been able to identify some systemic barriers that our Black students are facing in that differential in the attendance data, and if you feel that you have the tools to adequately address that.
So I guess I have two questions. One, Dr. Jameson, can you tell me who was asking the question, just so I know?
Oh, Amber is asking the question.
Okay, I thought that's who it was, but I didn't want to assume. So I think what I heard was, do we have the adequate resources in place to continue to make the growth that we're making? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, particularly for our Black students.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I think I'm going to tip my hat there to our counselor and our social worker, because they've been reaching out and they've partnered with the Love Project. They're getting ready to partner with My Brother's Keeper. They have started some groups. Dr. Maxwell has been right there with them as well. But I would say yes. Right now, with what we know and what we're doing, I feel that we have the resources we need. But as we continue to get into this and we potentially plateau with our improvement, we might have to look at different interventions. And so that might be where I need to come back to central office or the board and say, hey, we've kind of plateaued, this is what's happening, and I think we need some additional resources. And obviously, if there's anybody out there listening and they have other resources they'd like to send our way, we would like to do that. But right now, I would say between our building budget and the work that our staff is doing with groups, I would say right now the resources, as far as what we're doing and what we know, they're adequate for the work that we're doing. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
One thing that I heard Amber ask, but I don't know if you heard this part of it or not. It sounded like the resources part of the question was addressed, but there was an earlier part about, are you able to diagnose systemic issues specifically impacting our students of color?
So the question is, are you able to diagnose systemic issues for students of color around attendance?
So I think one of the things that we continue to look at, if you're looking at our, what was the test that, or the survey the students took 2 years ago? Panorama, thank you. One of the big things that really stood out to us for our Black students was their sense of belonging, and their sense of belonging percentage was lower than their peers. So I think that's part of the reason why we continue to want to make sure that we are pushing our K-fin structures, because they're very intentional about breaking down some of those barriers and getting them talking with other students in school. I think it's the reason why we are looking at its second steps, and we are deliberately teaching through that program because it's good work. And then it's also why we continue to encourage our teachers to get into Circle and share out. And it's also the reason why our classes have daily check-ins, because we want our students to come in and we want to create conversation and increase that sense of belonging. So the systemic thing, I would say, is looking at data. It would tell us that it was that sense of belonging where we were struggling, and I think we've been intentional about putting some things in place, whether it's our girls group. They met today, and they use our brand new big conference room, and there's a lot of smiles going on in that room, and definitely some sense of belonging that Miss Warren and Miss Brown have built with that group.
Mike, what are we doing to address the culture aspect and how that might affect that sense of belonging?
So I would say if we're looking at culture, and I'm assuming that you're speaking of like the culture of the building.
Yes.
I think it goes back to some of the answers I just gave, and that is, I am a big believer in, this is in school. I think that outdoor education, in the classroom, there is power in circles, because everybody is an equal distance in a circle, and we practice everyone having an equal voice and opportunity in those circles. And so often, students don't feel they have a voice, and that harms their view on what the culture is in our building. So our teachers have been very intentional about bringing students together in circle and having just some, lack of better words, some just raw conversation about how they're feeling at school and what we can do better.
I have a question, pretty much for all the principals for the building as I was looking at your building goals. And thanks for being transparent, saying that our black and brown students don't feel welcome at MRH, and it's going to take some time for them to feel welcome. And I see the plans that the buildings are working hard to make those students feel welcome, so attendance can be better, their grades can be better. What are you doing? I have two questions. What are you doing to where we are getting the parents more involved? You're doing all this with the students, but where do you say, okay, now it's time to involve the parents, now when they get to the end or things are getting out of control, but how can they be involved? Because we all know our students have to go home in the evening, and how can we have it to where the parents are more involved and maybe more accountable of what's going on with the students, their attendance, their grades? How can we help support them? Also, we can give all the support to the students, but we got to give support in the home. And also, what other organizations are you guys looking to that may have activities to help our black and brown students? We got to think about Hispanic students, their family. My Brother's Keeper is great, Love Project is great, but what other organizations can we also work with that can really relate to our students on their level?
So Mike, I'm going to repeat those questions. The first is, what are you doing?
Thank you.
What are you doing to get parents more involved and engaged, not only around attendance, but also academics? And then the second question is, what other organizations are you looking into to help black and brown students?
So the first one, what are we doing? And, I would say that right now that's an issue across the board for us. I felt like we had some really good traction going into COVID and getting families involved in school. And, like every school in the country, I really feel like we lost a lot of traction coming out of that. Some things that we were doing intentionally prior to that is we had a lot more parent involvement in our expeditions prior to COVID. And we were specifically, when we were recruiting parents to go on expeditions, we wanted to make sure that the pool of volunteers that we were taking were reflective of our student body as well. So those are conversations that we're having right now as we're moving into our big expeditions. I'm here planning for one right now in Jekyll, but we're talking about what does that look like now? Is this still the right time to bring families or parents back into the planning? And expeditions are a big part of what we're doing with learning, right? And then the second question is other groups. I actually failed to say, I should have said this. We've done some training for our staff, specifically around how are we interacting with our brown and black students. So we've done some training with NCCJ, and that actually worked out really nice for us because Naomi Warren was the trainer, and not only did she do a great job for us, but then we stole her and brought her to MRH. And she's doing a fabulous job for us. Another organization that we have partnered with, and they've actually done some training with us, because a big part of what we saw was black and brown students were the ones struggling to attend expedition. So we actually partnered with Outdoor Afro, which is an organization for and with black and brown adults who get into the outdoors. So we actually had them out at a professional development with us last year to specifically talk about this and work through strategies with us and kind of give us their perspective, right? Of, hey, what does this look like when we go to a 12, 13-year-old, student of color, and what does that look like for me as a 46-year-old, white guy? What does that look like from their eyes of me asking them, hey, let's get in a canoe, let's go hike through the woods, let's go to the river and let's put our feet in the river and let's pick up these macroinvertebrates out of the water and let's classify them, right? So I feel like there's been some good learning that's going on, but I'm also going to admit that there's always growth to be made.
I have a question about the NWEA data collection that's getting done. If we could talk a little bit more about how the results from those assessments are translated into curriculum and instruction. So you're doing them periodically throughout the year. How do you then pivot and take that data to inform what's happening in the classroom?
So the question is, how are you taking the data from NWEA to inform instruction in the classroom with teachers for students?
Yeah, and I don't know what Dr. Maxwell said, so I may be redundant on something. No, I'm not saying that to take a shot at you, Dr. J. It is what it is. So, the first thing is NWA is a new tool for us, right? So learning to read that data is something that we're doing now. So this first time we've provided that to teachers, and we've looked at that data and asked them to look for specific strands. And what strands are there that look like, if every single student is not doing well on a specific strand, then that's probably a curriculum issue. So that's where we need to look. If it's clusters of students who aren't doing well, then we need to look at those clusters and potentially group those clusters and deliver some direct instruction or intervention to those students, right? I think where the real leverage is in January when they complete their second one. So now we have 2 data points to compare for students. I think that's where the real growth is going to happen for us, and that's when teachers are going to look at that, and they're going to that'll be the data that they use for their AGMs or their assessment growth measures. But then also looking at that data, because we have a lot of teachers who are not content. They're not a communication arts teacher, they're not a math teacher, or they're not a science teacher, or there are 3 areas that we test in for NWEA, but we want to make sure that all teachers have buy-in on that data, because if it comes up that students are really struggling with complex writing skills or something, then how do we do that across all classes so the kids are getting hit with that across multiple different classes in general? So.
And then one last question, just in this final section about the discipline data. I want to applaud the work that you've done to reduce referrals in ISS and
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is, I would say, qualitative. It's through conversations. Some of that is conversations I'm having with them, Dr. Maxwell's having with them, conversations that they're having in Blue Knuckle Etiquette. I can tell you that every student that visits my office, one of the last things, the very last thing I ask them is, do you feel like you were treated fairly? Right? Because that is really important to students. They want to know that they had a voice. They want to know that they've been treated fairly. And that's a question I ask every student as they're leaving my office. And if the answer is no, then that's the beginning of another conversation. It's not the end of our initial. But I would say most of it is qualitative. But, you know, we have an issue, and, you know, we're not just suspending a student, or we're not just, you know, throwing them in detention. There is always some type of reflective piece. And, you know, they may groan about it a little bit, but I think in the end that adds to the accountability. And the fact that our repeat rate for students is going down, I would say what we're doing is working.
Well, thank you, Dr. Dietrich, for zooming in with us and for the time put into the presentation and also answering all of the questions that I've had as a follow-up. And my apologies for muting you. I didn't know it also muted the sound.
Oh, yeah, no worries.
Have a good night.
All right, thank you. Have a wonderful night.
You too.
Just learned something new. All right. So we are going to have the ECC to present next. Dr. Boyette, if you can just tell me when to click the next slide.
Thank you.
All ready to go for you.
All right, good evening, everyone. Good to see everyone. I want to preface this, you can already hear I'm a little under the weather, so bear with me as I might have a little coughing and need to take a drink. So I'm going to make it short and sweet, right? But definitely want to answer any questions that you have about the ECC. In the middle here, you see our theme for the year, which is relaunching Reggio relationships and relevance. I came in new last year, and it was the year that we relaunched preschool back to the ECC. So our 20 or so staff members in the preschool are very excited to get back in person with children. But there was also some feeling of the Reggio approach, which is so integral to the ECC, was lost in the pandemic because so much of it is child-centered, hands-on, and all about the spaces and being able to intermingle. And so slowly last year we brought that on and really wanted to do a strong relaunch this year. So you see some pictures that highlight some of those things with our theme. A former staff member coming back to the preschool, Mr. Woodfork, our PLC time together with our second grade class. Our pedagogista, thank you for bringing back a pedagogista part-time. She's also a preschool teacher. And our art teacher, Ms. Shep, who have done a lot with professional development around Reggio already this year. And then Ms. Stansler, our assistant principal, with our student recognition program. Thank you, Dr. Jameson. So we're going to start with attendance, and this shows the breakdown of race with our attendance. As you can see, our students that are Black, their attendance is lower, and I will address that here in our goal and then my noticings at the end of the presentation. So our attendance goal, and it is tough, Nurse Michelle and I talk about this often, is we tell students they have to go home, but we also tell students they need to be at school and have their attendance be higher. So we wrestle with that daily, as we do across the country, on wanting our students here, but wanting them well. So our goal is to increase in attendance. We feel like now that there isn't you need to go home 10 days, we can do that this year. But we want to do it very intentionally. So we do want to increase it by 7.6% to get into more of that 90 range that we need for our MSIP 6 points. However, we also want to be intentional about targeting certain populations of students. For example, our tardies. We know kids at our age aren't responsible for coming to school, it's the parents. So we are working diligently this year to create an attendance team that provides a support plan for families to have their children at school and on time. We know they're well if they can get to school, so working on getting them on time is something the attendance team has been progressing, and hoping that by helping families, whatever that looks like, to get them to school is something that will help increase our attendance across the board. This is new this year, so this is our COF. This is something that the state is now requiring for all incoming kindergartners. So our 6 kindergarten teachers spent a lot of time this fall assessing students in these different domains of learning, which we will not get into in this presentation, but this is broken down by administering this assessment, which I'd be happy to pass this along so you all can see what the observation form looks like. It shows how ready a student might be as they enter kindergarten. Why I displayed this screen for us today is our returning students. So if you look at overall readiness of our students, that's in blue. And so returning students attended our preschool, and this shows how ready they were based on those not ready versus our new students. So we had 45 incoming kindergartners from our preschool program, according to the COF, ready to enter kindergarten, whereas 27 of them weren't. So we haven't yet, but we now have the PLC process for our preschool teachers intact, like digging deeper into this COF data to really look at, out of those 27 who aren't kindergarten ready, according to our assessment, what should we be doing differently? Are those Head Start students that are receiving Head Start assistance? Are there Black and brown students? What can we be doing differently? So we do have a goal around preschool and kindergarten readiness. Just as a reminder, those who don't know, all of our preschool classes are mixed age. So our preschool teachers have begun to really drill in with focusing the most of our attention into those who are pre-K, those kids that are going to be moving into the kindergarten. So the classes are very mixed, but I was just talking to Mr. Scott Henkley today, and he has 13 out of his 19 kids that will be going to kindergarten. So we really want to target those students and making sure they are ready. So this one is around letter identification, and we had lots of back and forth conversation with our preschool team and the philosophical approach of literacy, and that is through their Foundations of Literacy kind of curriculum map that they've been using, and this is ongoing. So we're still kind of there's some tension and debate happening right now amongst our team on what that should look like, because we would want 100% of our preschoolers to know all of their letters, and we've been having discussions around the developmental appropriateness of that and what that should look like. But as you all know, our preschool is very Reggio inspired, but we also need to continue to implement what our academic expectations are, and that's a continued philosophical conversation, is how I'll say it for now. And then the next one up is going to be our STAR data related to literacy. So this is our kindergarten, first and second grade STAR assessment, and we take it again in January. So I'm very excited to see how these may change according to the new curriculum that we've adopted, Foundations. But you can see here, this is just kind of holistic where our students are. You can see that our second graders, actually it's our first grade cohort, which is our largest group, is the most proficient currently. And this is now broken down by all grade levels into our Black, Hispanic, multiracial, and white students. And as you can tell by the data there on the left, it is our Black and multiracial students who are scoring the lowest. So our goal for that is increasing from an average of 65.8% proficiency to 80% proficiency as measured by the STAR Early Literacy Assessment. Our steps for that will include input training and ongoing professional development and Foundations of Literacy for preschool, and then Foundations for our K1 and 2. So I will say, and Ms. Elam may talk about this also at the elementary level, implementing Foundations was a very exciting time for our teachers because we have not had a phonics curriculum in several years at that level in our district, and our teachers were just needing more. So there was this cry for, we need something systematic to teach phonics. And as we have been doing our instructional walks through,
out the building, what we're seeing in foundations is incredible, to the extent that during our PLC times, our teachers are talking about the aha moments of our kids reading now, and actually reading not in a fluent way, but reading with comprehension, and it is really changing the conversations in at our tables at PLCs, but also amongst the kids. They're drawing connections with this very intentional program. That's the first. I'll go faster. Sorry, if you can go back just one, I want to highlight one more thing, Dr. Jameson. As well as really working with our MTSS team that is starting up this year to build more tiered levels of support. We do have interventionists. Our interventionists now are talking a lot more about, we have tier 2 intervention for reading and math, but how do we get to tier 3? There are students that do need tier 3 more intensive instruction, and we're just not meeting those needs in our current programming. So even coming back into January, we're going to redo some groups based on our STAR assessments to start reaching each student where they really need the intervention, and those specialists to support that. And then finally, letters training has been incredible. Letters training is something we want all of our teachers to go through in the next 2 years. All of our kindergarten teachers are going through it right now, as well as 7 teachers have already been through and are in year 2. And we want to then keep pushing cohorts of teachers through this. As you may know, the science of reading is creating a lot of stir in the academia world, and our teachers are right there embracing it and really wondering how we can change our literacy practices. What we were taught in school is not what research is now telling us. So it's opening up the eyes and minds, and really making teachers wonder about their instructional framework for how they are teaching and how they may need to change some things. Thank you. Then on to math. This also shows comparatively where we are with our students in math. And the next one will also be our breakdown by demographics. It does, our math data for our Black and brown students does look higher, as you can see here. So our goal for math is to increase from 75.5 across the average to 85% proficiency based on our STAR math. The next one is our work that we've done with Washington University. So we've had a 2-year grant with Math 314. That partnership has included embedded coaching that's now happening for our teachers. We also have STEM DI coaches in both our elementary and the ECC that is helping us really have data-driven conversations and cycles of math observations and learning happening. So it's great having some experts come in and kind of show us the way. Also, our progress monitoring and collaboratives, as well as having data-driven observation and feedback sessions. And finally, our last goal is around discipline. We have not been, our student support notification is how we've been tracking discipline. Being an early ed principal, it's really hard to start putting a lot into Power School of starting to say a kid is having infractions at such a young age. So, however, I do know it's important to be able to look into Power School and us to be able to track and see discipline over the course, of a student's pre-K to 12 career. So one of our action steps is to definitely get into Power School and make sure we're documenting it like all the other schools. But currently, we had been using a student support notification via Google Forms. We had 113 referrals last year. We want to decrease that by 25% this year as well. So part of what we're doing is creating a behavior matrix, as well as training staff and implementing Tier 1 SEL curriculum, and also just training the teachers how to put it into Power School now. So my noticings around our data, and Ms. Stansel, my assistant principal, as well as our BLT, our building leadership team, has taken a data dive into all of this. We, wrote these goals together, but we do notice that our Black and Brown and IEP students are underperforming at the ECC, as well as more white students have been referred, but our Black students are being referred at a higher rate. So a couple of things that we are going to intentionally do with the noticings and making sure that we're addressing is building out an MTSS process to address those needs. Both at the Tier 1, 2, and 3 level, giving teachers more support on what to do at the Tier 1 level, both academically and behaviorally, on what is office managed versus classroom managed. I do have a prediction that because we are streamlining and systematizing more of the MTSS process, our referrals may go up. So it may not be the year that we reach our discipline goal, because I do expect, because of this process, step by step, a child might not appear in the office as much without having done more in the classroom. But if they are filling it out with fidelity, there may be more referrals, kind of the implementation curve and dip. We're also working on targeting the underserved populations at the ECC. Our current preschool population does not racially reflect our kindergarten population, so we're not meeting all of the families, our Black and brown families who could be going to preschool. One challenge has been transportation. A lot of our underserved communities are further away from the ECC, and transportation to the school is a barrier as we don't transport preschool children. So that is something I'm working. I sit on a regional early childhood director meeting, and I've been asking the mid-county early childhood directors, what do you do with transportation? And there's a plethora of answers, mostly, yes, that's our biggest challenge as well, to some school districts actually putting children on a bus. So interested in engaging in continued conversations, because we know early intervention is key, and we need to get our preschool students at school, especially our Black and brown students that are underrepresented. And then finally, we'll be starting a book study. The book is called Getting Into Good Trouble, Building an Anti-Racist School. So I am building the collective efficacy of the group of people that are passionate about that work to begin those courageous conversations that need to happen, so that we can start deliberately making sure that we are bringing equity to our schools. What questions may you have? And I didn't cough, everybody. I can't believe it.
I have a question about the kindergarten readiness
Yeah.
data that maybe you can help clarify. On the first slide, it shows that our ECC students who are returning, we have a 45% kindergarten readiness. And then on the next slide, we're looking for 100% readiness, but that is specifically around letter identification.
Exactly.
So given the investments that we make at the ECC, is that adequate? Is that an adequate goal? And I heard you say that there were some differences of opinion about whether or not we need to make this more rigorous. What, I guess I wonder what the different opinion that would prevent us from making it more rigorous would be.
Yeah, good question. So I can share with you, Amber, at one point we had like 85% of preschool students will get to a certain number of letters. So the interventions have been happening where we've been doing targeted intervention with preschool students who are only identifying 0 to 10 letters. So my next step, and I wasn't quite there yet by the time this board presentation was due, is to identify who our students are, specifically those 5, those pre-K students in our PLC work, to identify who the students are who need major intervention to get to the 26. Because yes, I think, the idea is 100% will get to 26 letters and be walking in, but that's just not quite the current reality yet. As well as doing a deeper dive into this Foundations of Literacy document that has been kind of the driver of the work that has been done at the preschool, knowing that we also have the early childhood learning standards, and we're doing crosswalks between different documents, as well as foundations as well, and introducing letters training to our preschool teachers. There has been some philosophical pushback on bringing something like Foundations, a very scripted curriculum, into the preschool that is very Reggio-inspired. So those, and I'm not directly answering your question well enough, but our next steps is to identify those who are not getting to 26 letters, what are we doing? 21 was actually a number that they used a couple years ago at the ECC to say our goal was to get to 21 out of 26, but I very much want to make sure we use PLC time, which we brought to the ECC this year because we didn't have that collaborative time. Our preschool teachers don't have early release days, so they're not part of CAT, as well as they don't have common plan time, but we brought preschool specials this year into our master schedule so we can meet 30 minutes weekly as a team, and these are things we're starting to slowly unpack these last several weeks, but definitely need to do more work with. And I appreciate the sentiment that, yes, we should be rigorous and we should be producing students that know all their letters right out of school. There's also like research and developmental appropriateness of And you can see from that document that knowing most of the letters is what research will say, and I should have somebody standing next to me, one of my preschool experts, that could talk more about developmental appropriateness, but that's something we wrestle with a lot.
So I think I hear you saying you see opportunity for growth over time in this
Mhm.
particular readiness goal
Yes.
based on interventions that you're making right now that will
Yes,
help with that.
thank you.
I do have another question that
Yeah.
came from our absent board member.
Sure.
Because it predates my time on the board. Apparently, several years ago, the previous principal at the ECC did an equity audit and made a presentation to the board on the overrepresentation of Black students in discipline referrals. Apparently, there were steps taken at the time to support anti-bias training for teachers. And this board member wonders what focus can we maintain currently around this particular issue, and how can we be tracking it?
Okay. I was aware before the pandemic that the ECC staff was getting ready to dig into the social justice standards and how to embed, kind of crosswalk it with the Reggio approach. And but I wasn't aware of any anti-bias training. So I started a social justice pathway last year, again, with interested people. We have not done a school-wide approach yet, and bringing back that group to do this book study here starting in January. However, it is a need. So I have been talking to Dr. Ambers Phillips about how do we bring anti-bias, anti-racist social justice work to our building. In other districts I've been in, we really need an outside person to come in and do that work. I've tried to do that work as a white woman myself as a principal, and it is not a healthy way to do the work. And so I'm very eager to partner with the district. I know there are plans in place to bring that work district-wide, and we have a committed group of about 20 people in my building who are passionate about it, have invested time outside the school day to have these conversations. Also passionate about talking about transgender topics and making sure our ECC is becoming a place that mirrors our other buildings with our bathrooms being gender neutral, other things that we're not there as a building yet, but are definitely opening those conversations. Thank you.
So, I have a question. When you mentioned about the attendance, because some of our students, they're thinking of the situation they're in, if parents don't have the resources or transportation to get them to school. Have you guys kind of communicate with the parents, like, what can we do, how can we help you? Even making them feel welcome that the school would like their child to be in attendance, and we all know attendance is important, but some ways of communicating, getting their input on how can they make the situation better. I know it's not much the school can do, we don't want to put other kids in other people's cars, but try to help them understand, yes, I'm going to get my child to school, and what help can they can have with that. And I'm sure they want their child to school.
Yeah, absolutely. So our attendance team didn't get up and running until the last several weeks. So our next step in January is to have more of those exact conversations, Ms. Robinson, that you just spoke of, to have that open, bring the families in, sit down and say, what can we do to help out? Because there are definitely, different solutions and incentives and other things, but we always keep in mind that it is the parent, right? It is the guardian, the parent, who is ultimately responsible. So it's bringing them in to help, bringing them in, whether we need to go pick them up and bring them in or how that looks. And I think our home visit program does such a great job of meeting the families where they are. And our party in the parks that we did this year, we did some extra pop-up ones at underserved communities that haven't had necessarily the school coming in, in a larger capacity to say, we're here for you. So making sure we're just connecting with our families and intentionally doing more in places we need to. Yeah. Thank you.
I have a question about the way your math goal and your literacy goal sort of follow from the previous, actually, yeah, the first literacy goal and the second elementary math goal. I'm just having a hard time. I appreciate how much information, how many information is used in that every group, you know, where are people falling, but then it gets boiled down into a goal that's really about one number.
Okay,
So I'm just wondering
yeah.
if we unpack it a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So in my notes, I have kind of unpacking, I did an average of K1 and 2, but just a quick example of that for math. We had a star score, and this is stars, so we definitely have other measurements that we can be using as well. Our first grade students had a proficiency of 81.7%, and so, but our second grade was at 70.1. So we averaged those two to get that 75.5% goal up to 85%, but it would look differently. I just didn't, for the sake of this presentation, break down that first grade goal as we sit in our PLCs. We have this goal because it's much more specific, so I kind of kept it generic. But yes, there is a breakdown that we're doing within our grade levels based on where our students currently are by grade level, and then by class as well.
So just to make sure I understand, what you're showing us as the goal, the single goal, this is the number that we're working on. As more detail behind it, or we want to make sure that the result is X, or, you know, however you're doing it. Is that right? Or are you really focused on this composite number as your goal?
Good question. So overall, for the sake of this presentation, like school-wide goals, where that's the focus, is just because it's smart, you know, it's a SMART goal that's attainable and very specific and measurable. But drilling down, we're working on our like below basic students becoming basic. That's the most points that we can get, and making sure that we're progress monitoring the students on where they're currently scoring and pushing them to the next level. So growth is what we really want to see amongst all the students, and we do that in our PLC time, broken down. Like we'll look at all second grade data together, but the teachers will be sitting with their classroom of kids and saying, so-and-so is right here, I need to push them to this point. They're at risk if they don't progress in this amount, you know, from one benchmark to the next.
And I can help with that one.
Yeah.
So the SMART goals that were developed are collective, but when they work in their PLCs, they actually are looking at individual students and looking at what's needed to actually move them to the closest next level. And so while it's not reflected here because we were trying to keep it at the 30,000 feet level, that does happen in their PLC work, and they actually make goals specific to each grade level for each of the classrooms, and then there's a collector for the grade level and then a collector for the whole.
So I think that the piece that I still haven't heard yet, I just want to make sure that the way you listed is, you identified on slide 8, for example, our students with colors are struggling, right? So what I would love to see is on that goal, yes, we have an average overall goal, and also here's how we're specifically working
Okay.
to improve that.
Yeah.
And hopefully that's in there, but if not, I think
Yeah.
that needs attention.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's my first board presentation. I think I made it. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, we'll go with the high school. Dr. Brower, do you want to share your own screen, or you okay with that, or you want me to?
What did Craig do?
I was listening.
You guys can do, I'm just using this for notes, I can see better. Yeah. Well, I'm Kevin, the high school principal, and we did a lot of streamlining for this. We started with 25, 30 slides, like, okay, we gotta do this in 7 minutes, tighten it up. And we're really trying to be succinct, so I hope it comes across that way, because we worked hard to do that. In our first slide, we're looking at, you heard a lot about NWA this evening, so I'm going to continue with that. It is new to us, so we're learning. We found that reading and evaluating informational text was a strand. We were really looking for strands, because the EOC does not give strands. And the EOC test changed. And over the pandemic, it also changed a little bit too. So if you look at our EOC data over time, you will see a fluctuation, but we're always pretty high above state average in most of them. So we thought this is a good opportunity for our staff to value this assessment, which we just brought on, and for us to learn about it. And we chose reading and evaluating informational text under the reading area because we thought that was the lowest one. the lowest strand we saw. And then we thought about, well, how do you measure how far you're supposed to go when you've only taken this one time? Same problem Mike's mentioned and Jill. And so Dr. Smith found some norm data that the NWA shared with us for the average growth of 9th, 10th, 11th graders in each subject area over a 1-year span. So we used that as a baseline for us because that's all we had. And we thought, let's make our goals reachable, but progressive and challenging for us. That's what we did for every one of these. So if you look at a 2-point for the 9th grade, well, that's only 2 points. Well, you have it in a Lexile, that's almost 80 to 100 points in Lexile. And you change that to SRI. We found the translation from Lexile to RIT, and it's about 40 per point. And so when you look at 2, it's deceiving. 100 points in 1 year is a pretty strong growth. And so we chose these numbers based on that information we gleaned from the NWE folks themselves. So you see, 22 means that's the number of kids right now who are low to low average, and 36 is the number of sophomores, and 20 is the number of juniors. So you think, what action steps are we going to do here? The next one, please. Well, it started right in this room on Tuesday when Dr. Smith, who's a reading specialist, by the way, when Mrs. Louth was a reading specialist, Mr. Castle, who's a ComArts superstar, we started training the staff on basic reading comprehension, content strategies that go across all contents. Because we feel that literacy is the backbone of every educated person there. And we say literacy, reading, writing, speaking, and reasoning, all those skills that we need to formally teach to our kids. So that PD started formally this Tuesday, and we also use our PLCs to collect and analyze student work and samples. And our teachers have a literacy strategy chart, which we share with them. When they're doing this in class, they're documenting it. And now we're going to go in and watch it and give feedback as well. So we only had 3 days of this. Tuesday, Wednesday, yeah, 3 days. And that chart's filling up quick. So we did this about 2013 or 14. We really pushed this hard. And then around the pandemic, we stopped doing this. We solely focused on safety, security, and health and mental health. That was our push. This is the first year I can say we still do that, but we're finally pushing back to academic focus like these. So the third one talks about regular observation with effective feedback tracking. And what I just mentioned, we do have a tracker. Dr. Jameson shared with me another tracker about leverage action step. It's not always literacy related, but we are making that push. The next one. Chris, are you doing this or Kat?
It's me.
Oh, it's you. I'm looking like. All right, so we also need a math one, and we chose NWA again, because that's going to be our steady benchmark, hopefully, for years to come. And we can always come back to that. And we found the EOC is not a steady, necessarily, benchmark over time, so we wanted something more steady. And so we looked at the norms, averages for the years, which we were shared by NWA folks, and we found it was about a 3.6 growth rate over a year. Okay, let's try that for the first year. Now, after our second test, we might tweak these. We might figure this out. Oh, we're moving faster than we thought. So you look at 55 low and low average students for 9th grade, but keep this in mind. If you're taking Algebra 1 for the first time ever, and you take this test the 3rd week of class, you probably aren't doing that well. In fact, if you are doing well, why are you in that class? So you should be maybe in Algebra 2 or Geometry. So that number doesn't shock us. We're not happy with it, but it gives us something to look at. And we know exactly who those students are. That's the cool part about NWA. So the action steps. Oh, we did choose numbers and data, by the way, because that was our lowest strand. And that's a wide array of things. Numbers and data means quadratic functions, multi-step calculations. It also refers to graphing. So it's pretty broad, but we had Miss Noby, our Algebra 1 teacher, look at it and break it down, and there's a lot of bullet points under there, more than I'm saying right now. Okay, next slide, thank you. So what are we doing? We do currently have algebra labs to support those students who we've targeted as low and low average. And so that's a separate group that we support with a double up sort of math support. Now we're taking that test again on January 23rd that week. I'm the math PLC team guy who leads that team. And so what we're anxious to see is how we do and compare that data. What happened to these low and low average students from test 1 to test 2? And where do they fall at? And what are we going to do about it as a team in our PLC group? The second thing we looked at was we added a layer of math support. Actually, I worked with Dr. Ambrose Phillips on this. And we're going to try to continue that with Miss Noby staying after to do the targeted algebra support for these students. Right now we have 55 students and 40 of them are in our targeted classes right now. So there's 15 that currently aren't. So how do we reach them? Well, before and after school, first semester. Second semester, we're adding another section of Algebra Lab. When Rashad, Sam, and I sit down, I'm like, okay, what do we need second semester? We're adjusting the schedule. And we realize we need more Algebra Labs, which means you got to squeeze some other things and move some things around. So that's what we've done. And we're anxious to see how that pans out. We think it's going to go well. The next goal, I think, is for Sam. Dr. Smith's going to talk about graduation rates. We might as well.
Hi everyone, Sam Smith, Assistant Principal at the high school. Happy to be here with you. So the goal I'm digging into right now is about graduation rate. So last year we ended the year at actually 95 according to our DESI reports, but after a couple months DESI revealed another report and we are at 96 currently. So we're just waiting to see if that changes again because we found that 4 students were unaccounted for last year's graduating class. Ms. Ward has identified the location of 1, so I'm hoping that that number shrinks a little bit smaller. Because of that, we're setting our target this year for 98%. We have 82 students enrolled in our senior class. Technically, 85 will be our current cohort because we have 3 additional students that are in the junior level grade at the Mo Options space. And at any time, they could be finishing up and graduating. So we would transition their graduate cohort year when they get into that Mo Options program space. Our action steps to dig into this is started back in July when I saw that number of students that did not graduate with cohort because I did not expect to see 5 students on that list. I thought we had 100%, to be completely honest. When we dug into that, we realized there were some students that left us several years ago, at freshman year even, that we didn't realize had not re-enrolled in another school. So we have a new plan going forward where we cross-check everybody that should be in a cohort year with who we have and trace every little step of it. So now I've identified 10 students that started with us in the class of 2023 who will not be with us because they are either homeschooled, have moved out of state, maybe even country, but they're accounted for now. So I'm excited to say that that will not happen again. So for our 85 students, we are doing a series of steps to make sure that they are on track for graduation. You might ask why our goal not 100. Our goal always really is 100, but we know that we have students that have a variety of needs and we want to give them the time and space to make sure that they finish their high school requirements as they need to and as they're ready for. And sometimes they need an extra year, an extra semester. We already have identified 2 or 3 students who are going to need some special attention and a new plan. And so we are working with their parents right now to figure out what that's going to look like for second semester. Every week we are meeting with our students. We have a very engaged teacher assistant, Coach Rob, who works with a group of students in here and all over the building to get them caught up, check their grades. He monitors that really daily, not even weekly. And he reports back to us on any red flags that we need to know before it gets out of hand. He also is meeting with teachers religiously and making sure that they have all the work that they need to get caught up on. We have a weekly Students of Concern form that our teachers are reporting to us to let us know if they've seen any trends and not submitting work, attendance issues that might be impacting their grades and lack of progress to grad that we're checking on as well. Mr. Harcharik, the senior counselor, and myself as the senior principal meet with students on a weekly basis and track their progress as well. We have 6 students who are going to be finishing up in January as early graduates. And right now we're starting them on their senior checklist. So we're doing a little test run of how the end of the year will go again because we're constantly tweaking that process to make sure that that is an efficient, easy process for families and the students. And people who have had seniors in this room kind of know what that is like, and we're always making it better. So there we go. Goal 3.
Good evening, I'm Rashad Davenport, Assistant Principal at Maplewood Richmond Heights. So our next goal is about attendance. By the end of this school year, we want our attendance to be at 80%. Last year it was at 67.9. So we're looking to increase it by 12.1%. And so if you go to our action steps, as Mr. Dietrich, Dr. Dietrich stated earlier, our proportional data with our NSELF score, we need 90% of the kids to be here 90% of the time. So we're moving from building attendance data to looking at every kid's attendance and making sure that they're here every day, 90% of the time. So one of the things we've done, I work with Dr. Maxwell in middle school. We meet bi-weekly. We look at trends. We look at our policies. We look at our procedures. We also look at family dynamic. We also talk about different ways and how we can reach kids from the middle school to high school level. We also meet, we have our attendance by monthly team. That's our 105 team, and we look at students holistically. So not only are we looking at grades, we're also looking at attendance. We're also diving into, the reasons why they're not at school, contacting those parents and families as well. And then we also have monthly attendance meetings. And from those meetings, our monthly attendance meetings, bi-weekly attendance meetings, and bi-monthly attendance meetings, we do different, we have different things that we set up, whether we send 5-day letters for students who have missed 5 days, we have 10-day letters, and then we also do home visits. And our home visits, they work pretty well. I think it allows students for us to see us in a different light, and it lets them know that, that we really care for them, not just here in the school building, but just in the community as well. Our second action step is to use our daily tardy log and attendance rate that we get from Mr. Hunt, our attendance person. And from that log, we use it to track our daily attendance as well as students who are coming to school late. And one of our biggest issues is students coming tardy. So we're using those reports to kind of help build those relationships and get kids to school on time.
Okay, so we're going to go to discipline. I really wanted to choose a couple specific subgroups for this. And you always ask yourself, who's kind of benefiting from what we're doing here, right? Who's benefiting from the stuff we got going? And that's a basic equity question we should always ask for everything we're doing. And then you ask yourself, ignoring stuff doesn't really help it. So we're trying to put it out there and deal with it. So we're looking at this school year. We want our free and reduced discipline to decrease by 15% from the previous year's baseline data from 65 to 50. Same thing we're asking for African Americans. We think we can have a bigger drop in that as we look at our data. And we want this to be more accurate, representative of our proportional population of our kids. Right now it's too high, similar to what Dr. Dietrich said earlier. So with that being stated, a lot of the things that, on the next slide, Rashad and Sam have talked about are going to be mentioned here as well. We start with, we want to keep our relationships in good repair. Restorative practices to us is all about making sure that the relationships are repaired, yes, and you learn. You learn something from it as well. And that comes with great help from our BDE staff, Travis and Whitney. They're, I consider, experts in this process, and so we lean on them a lot for support. If we have a student who we're struggling with discipline, hey, what do you guys think we should do? You've worked with him or her or them. What do you think we should do next? And they will help us guide a plan. Sometimes it's check-ins, like Mike said, from morning, lunch, and after school. Other times it's, okay, let's have a home visit with the SRO. Let's have Grauer go, because this person gets along with me better. So we find the staff member that they fit, right? And that could be anybody on our staff. We also target proactive communication. So the baseline for communications is not, I gotcha, but it's, let me see how I can, praise you in some way while you're doing this work. So it's an assumption of positive intent. And that goes a long way with kids, and you get more buy-in. And then when you have the difficult conversation, it goes better. With the parents too. So that's what we're going to be our baseline. So when you see students in the hall, like, hey, what are you guys doing? It's more like, hey guys, how can I help you guys? Or tell me what's going on right now. And that goes a long way. And then we can monitor progress with our EduClimber, which is another data source that Rachel helps me a lot with. I can get weekly, daily, I can break it down by African American free and reduced students and get that in real time and see how we're doing. We use student conferencing a lot too. We always pull kids in. That's something we believe in, the personalized service of this district. That's our strength. We want to make that even stronger. So all of our kids, we know all of them. We know all their names. We know where they live. We've been in their homes. And that's something that we take a lot of pride in. And that goes a long way when we talk to parents, because we get immediate buy-in when we talk to them. It's not just like, what are they calling me for? Responsive scheduling in high school is a big deal. Some families have certain needs, others don't. And we are responsive to that based on what they tell us and what they need. I'm thinking of a number of students. We had a meeting there with our 105 team, which is our intervention team, and we're looking at, okay, how can we adjust? And we're not waiting for semesters or quarters to adjust. We're waiting for, really, the time is now. Like, there's a sense of calm urgency when you're running a high school because there's deadlines, there's credits, and you have to be active in that. And finally, partnering with students with trusted staff stakeholders. Some students I know prefer to see Sam or Rashad than me. I don't take that personally. You toss your ego aside and say, then go talk to them, right? If you work better with Dr. Welker, see him. So no one teacher reaches every student. It just doesn't happen. We try. And so we have to toss our ego aside and say, let's try some other person So we're always open to that. And we do take a caseload. Each one of us here has a caseload of students that we work with on the 105 team. And it's a full wraparound service. It's so, and I'll use Naomi, I'll use Justin, I'll use Debbie, our student services people. I'll use Chris if I need to. I'll use any one of you if I need to. So that's not something that's the communal teaching and the learning that we value in this district. And we embrace that at the high school. So with that being said, what are we trying to get better at according to this presentation? Well, we noticed the African American free and reduced students are overrepresented in areas of discipline and tardy truancy. Our tardy truancy is by far our biggest discipline, 74%. That's because we made that our part of our process, because over the pandemic, we did not count that at all as a discipline issue. We didn't think that was appropriate at that time. So now we're pushing it back. And when I say discipline, we're not yelling and screaming at kids and saying, where were you? Why are you late? You know, that's not how we roll. What we're saying is talk to me about what's going on. And I heard Jill say, and she's right, these kids don't control what time they get here. Some of our kids don't either. When you dig deep and you find out, well, my grandma has to take me, and okay. One student was having some crisis, was in St. Charles for a week. And I pulled her in to give her a lunch detention, and she told me the story. I'm like, I can't give you lunch detention. One of you on this board, child, came to me and said, you know what, my bus was late. It's not my fault. And they were right. We're not holding them to that standard. But we are holding them to the standard because we want to get better at our attendance first hour. That's a big thing in high school, that first hour attendance. And when you start 5 minutes early one year than the previous year, oh yeah, it takes them a while to figure that out. The 10th grade has the most students at the low and low reading average. We know that. It is early in the year. We know that number is going to improve with our targeted supports. Our Algebra 1 data, which we talked about, shows room for growth, and at this time of the year it should. Our 11th grade attendance rate is our lowest class rate. Not sure why. And our attendance dipped during the pandemic, and you know that we've made a concerted effort to put structures, responses, programming into place to address it, as Mr. Davenport said. And you heard Dr. Smith talk about grad rate and a very proactive team that is addressing that and very vigilant with each student who is a senior here, more so than ever this year. So that's what we got. We'd love to hear any questions you have.
I have a question on goal 4A.
What is 4A? Discipline. Okay.
First of all, I want to appreciate that you're specifically calling out subgroups that need to be improved relative to others. I just want to ask a question on this one. I think there may be some intended consequence for not to be successful. The question I have is, what would happen hypothetically if discipline incidents were reduced by 20% for your non-free and reduced students, and they were decreased by 15% for your free and reduced students? I would think of that as a success.
Yeah.
But you would fail that, right?
Yeah. Well, again, these are goals, and I think failure is a harsh term to use for this because it's a process that, you know, for us, success is in the doing, not in the getting. And so we want to do the right thing and make sure that we're getting better at it over time. And hopefully that, yeah, we want to get to 20%, don't get me wrong. We're very competitive people, all of us, so we don't want to lose that opportunity. But in the process of doing the things and we see progress, there's some wins there too, right? We'd like it to be 0%, right, for all the kids. That's a dream that I'd love to have someday. Then you probably wouldn't need us. But yeah, I don't know if that answers it. You guys want to add anything to that?
I would assume all of the strategies that we're doing is going to apply across the board. So any decrease in discipline and any increase in SEL supports are going to probably impact all of our kids. So you're right, but if down at the end, subgroups might look a little different. But we're hoping for a decrease in general.
And our biggest discipline piece is the 20s. And so, you know, with the meetings that we have trying to reduce those tardies, I think you'll see a reduction in discipline. And so, you know, that's our key point right now. Like 74% of those disciplinary actions are tardies.
197, I think we had discipline, and 150 were. So there's not a lot of actual, what you consider old school discipline happening. I go weeks without getting a student, you know, sent to my office for so-called disruption of the typical discipline you see in a high school. And so, yeah, and when they come, we deal with it on a personalized basis. And we always hear their side of the story and assume good intentions and go from there.
I want to talk a little bit about the goal and the NWE.
I appreciate the difficulty in setting goals around an assessment tool that you've never used before and building that on assessment tools that changed year over year. In setting this goal, is there an opportunity for us to learn from other schools that use this tool?
Mhm.
I mean, as I hear you say
Yeah.
it, like, we think this is the right goal for us.
Yeah.
But does the assessment itself provide information about what a reasonable goal should be for a school of our size, of our outcomes? What would be a reasonable goal based on others that are using this tool? Is that data available to us from peer districts? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I
how we
remember when
can
Dr.
deliver.
Jameson asked us, she kind of gave us a little smorgasbord of assessment, you know, that we might use. NWA, I forget the other ones either, but you might remember them. I remember sending the email out, because we do a St. Louis County Principals group, which I lead, and I asked them, what do you guys think are the best ones? And most of them said, we don't use them. I'm like, well, that's not helpful. But the ones that did use them, and Rashad came from the school that used them, so he's been a resource for us, is Brentwood's first year, Afton, who's my assistant principal, now runs Afton, so I talked to her a lot. They got 1 year under their belt. But that was very valuable for us. And then Confluence, where he used to work at, used it. So we had a little bit of that, but you know, we're learning as we go, like we said, and I haven't had a lot of comparative schools like us. Brentwood's in the same stage we're in, so they're learning as they go. Acton's 1 year in, and Chris can talk about that, I think, a little bit if he needs to, McGee. So yeah, I think we got a ways to go, and we're learning, and if there's a better way to do it, yeah, let us know, and we'll do it.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Great, thank you guys.
Thanks.
And our last presentation is Ms. Elam from the elementary school. Last but not least.
Good evening, Board of Education, Superintendent, COA, students, staff, and community members of MRH. I am the proud principal at MRH Elementary School. My name is Carlisha Elam, and I will be doing our board presentation. In order to begin thinking about goals, I had to start with the data. And what does the data say to us in order to create these goals? And so here you see our STAR reading data. I have it separated by grade level. You have 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. As you can see, approximately 60% in each grade level are at or above grade level in the area of reading as measured by STAR reading data. You can go to the next slide. Here you see it also separated by grade level, and this is our STAR math data. What we notice is, looking at this data, you see at 3rd grade, you have a larger number of students that are at or above grade level in the area of math, and as it goes across through 6th grade, the number significantly decreases. All right, looking at this data for our academic goals, I wanted to divide them by ELA and math goals. So, by the conclusion of the 2022-2023 school year, our school-wide ELA performance will increase from our fall baseline data of 69% at or above grade level to 76% as measured by STAR reading. With this, I was able to look at each grade level and identify students who we felt we could target as far as moving over into our at or above grade level in order to come up with this percentage goal. For math, we will, by the conclusion of the 2022-2023 school year, we will move our math performance from our fall baseline of 52% at or above grade level to 60% as measured by STAR math. And we did the same thing for that. So in order to meet those goals, we are being very intentional about our work doing PLCs. During this time, we are looking at units. Teachers are analyzing data, using pre and post test, creating pre-tests and post-tests, and looking at those data and outlining the specific standards that we are looking at in order to increase and make an impact on our students' performance. This is by looking at our student work samples, analyzing student trends. After we have completed our post-test, what do we do now with the data? And so teachers are coming up with different strategies to use and pinpoint students that we can use within the classroom. We want to continue to honor what we have here at MRHE. We write our own curriculum. And one thing that we noticed is that teachers needed more time to look at planning and preparation. How am I breaking apart the lesson? How am I tailoring the lesson for our students? So teachers are going through professional development on planning and preparation as well as differentiation. So we see example with our math data. We use the curriculum that we currently have. What do we need to do and put in place in order to show differentiation for our students so that we can meet their needs? Whether that is scaffolding, asking probing questions during mid-course corrections, as well as small group instruction to help our students. We also are using this within our Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions where we have our math and reading specialists who have students who are tailored and pinpointed to help them to make the academic growth. We also have, it's kind of hard to breathe with this math on and talk, I'm just being honest. Implement frequent and regular observations with effective feedback. Myself and assistant principal, we have teachers that we are divided by grade level. This is for academic and behavioral, as well as our math and reading coach have teachers that we have identified that need coaching support, and they push in, provide support, as well as providing modeling, coaching, feedback, and helping the teachers to get everything that they need in order to be successful. Here you find our monthly attendance. This is full day is in blue. Then we have period attendance as well as our attendance rate within SIS. You see this goes from August through December, and we had a dip in October, but you see a gradual increase through December. So our goal is that we will increase by 10% of the previous year's baseline of 73.6% as measured by Power School. We will do this we started our attendance team meetings, and we will continue to have those bi-weekly with our attendance team. During this time, one thing that we realized that a lot of the students that were absent, it was either for health reasons or mental health. And with that, we know that there's an increased need for us to provide SEL supports. What we have is great, but we would love to put other procedures in place, and we're trying to problem solve as to what they can look like and find other resources for our students to get them what they need while they're in school. This is our monthly discipline data. So I will say this is our first year of using Power School. We use Power School and only Power School. There's no other documentation for us for our discipline data and documentation. So any phone calls as well as discipline data is in Power School. This PD was presented to our teachers mid-September. We also did office managed versus classroom managed behaviors to help our teachers to know what would I write a referral for, and giving them outlines of when this happens, what do I do next? And so you will see that knowing that we started in mid-September, started importing data, there was an increase in October where we are on a decline as far as the number of referrals that we are receiving. So our goal for the climate of our school is to decrease the previous year's baseline of out-of-school suspensions from 15 by 25% as measured by Power School. And we will do this by providing professional development to our staff on school-wide universals at the beginning, before the school year started. We had a building leadership team. We created a building leadership team that consists of 20 staff members that volunteered to be a part of this team. We meet monthly. And during this time, at the beginning of the school year, we were able to create our core values. And our core values are what we live by, not only for our students, but also our staff. And during this time, we talked about what does it look like for me to be resilient with a coworker, with a student, with a family member, for our students to be resilient with each other. We even created matrix for each portion of our school. So on the playground, what does it look like to provide our core values? Each one. And we have being resilient, showing integrity, being mindful, and empathetic. And it was important for us to lay this out so that we can help our students to understand what does that look like in the restroom? What does it look like in the classroom, in the hallway? And so this way, we have a universal language within our school, and it's not identified by teacher, but also throughout the whole school. So no matter who you are, where you are, you know what our expectations are and how we, as students at MRH and staff and participants of the community, how do we engage in these school-wide universals? We implemented MTSS process to analyze data and implement effective strategies for students. We have given our TFI to our building leadership team. This helps us to look at how are our tier 1 supports for all students. We were able to do our SRSS. This assessment identified students that were displaying high risk for internalizing and externalizing behaviors. One thing that we did notice was with externalizing behaviors, 49% of our students are at high risk. That means that we have 49% of our students who are suffering with anxiety, depression, being shy. This was alarming for us because it was like our students are pouring out. And it was very important for us to be intentional about our tier 1 supports that we are providing for all students, when at least half of them are displaying internalizing behaviors. And so we use our Second Steps program daily. We have our SEL team who has made sure that we have a calendar to implement this, and also provide reboots for when we go on break. So after we come off of break, we'll do a reboot of our school-wide expectations so students know how we are everywhere we are within our building, reviewing our matrix, as well as being able to help our students to, before going to break, have our community circles again and talking about how am I feeling, what do I need? And I think that that is very important for our students so they can share with their teachers. We even went, before going on to break, we had a session where we talked about how we operate on the internet and cyberbullying. There were some things that bubbled up from that and more information that we received, and to help students to be able to navigate that as they go on this break, where they will have a lot of idle time, where they may be on social media and on their computers a little more than usual. Okay, analysis. So what we realized when looking at our students with free and reduced lunch, there was a significant discrepancy in the data for students with free and reduced lunch versus our school-wide community. So with free and reduced lunch, I believe it was about 27%, whereas with our school-wide, it was at 52%. I can pull the other one up on my phone.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I have it right here. I'm good. 42 versus 69 for reading for free and reduced lunch. We also have our Black and Hispanic students scoring significantly less at the at range level. In math, it was very starking for me. They were at 19% versus 52% in the area of math. And then in the area of ELA, we have 35 to 69%. There is 63% of our 6th grade students with an IEP that are at or above grade level in the area of reading. And our 3rd grade students have the highest attendance percentage at all grade levels. That is all I have. Are there any questions that you have for me?
I appreciate the breakout in the analysis slide. I think it's similar to the ECC comment, and I think it would be helpful to see a goal built around that and how you help you reduce some of those disparities or focus on those subgroups.
Okay.
I don't know if you have ideas.
Oh, you were asking. I thought you said create a goal. So being intentional about targeting who those students are and seeing how we can ensure that we are meeting their needs based off of what they are. So one thing that we have in place is that our SEL team is looking at analyzing the attendance behavioral and academic needs of our students. And one thing we could do, and if people are in 2 or 3 of those groups, how are we identifying them and putting them in small groups with our counselors and SEL teacher. The other thing would be for us to analyze what does that look like with academics, and when they are with that, how can we help them and create an environment for them to be able to flourish.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you, guys.
Okay, 403, strategic planning update.
So this one will be fairly easy. So the board met and discussed the core values, the mission and vision, and the feedback from the steering committee. And from that, we formed with creating several iterations of the mission vision based on the feedback from the Board of Education. So the presentation that was used is actually linked to the agenda. The next steering committee meeting is scheduled for January 12th from 6 to 8 p.m. And at that time, we will present to the steering committee the drafts, and then information will be shared back to the board based on the feedback. So that is the update regarding the last strategic planning meeting with the Board of Education.
Okay. Before we move on to 404, I just want to thank everybody that presented and for that those thorough presentations. Appreciate you all. Happy holidays. Sorry, I'm hungry. Okay, 404, communicable diseases update.
Technology as a way of networking, you want it to work. So I always start off with we are still in the pandemic, and while we're still in the pandemic, it does not mean that we are getting the information that we once received from the St. Louis County Department of Health, as well as the epidemiologists that I used to meet with monthly. So this is our dashboard data retrieved on December 7th, and as you can see at that time, we had 1 positive case at the ECC, and we did not have any positive cases at the elementary and middle school and high school campus. We currently have a 0.25 positivity rate at the ECC, and that's a result of a staff member not being full-time. They are part-time in the building. And at the elementary school, we have no current cases. And currently at the shared middle school and high school campus, we have a 1.25% positivity rate. Again, those staff members are part-time, and that's why their number is reflected that way. The new data that I am sharing, which has not yet been updated by the St. Louis County Department of Health, is our influenza tracking report. So that data actually is a lot higher than our current COVID numbers. And the information that I received is that influenza A is actually higher, but now they're starting to see signs of influenza B to surface, and they expect to see an increased peak as we go into winter break. And then in addition to the influenza data that was received, they also indicated that initially the cases were in students, and now they're starting to see an increase in cases in adults. RSV, which was one that we discussed earlier on, where we started to see a peak sometime around September and October, and those numbers were extremely high. Typically, you don't see RSV cases until around January, but you can see now in December, those numbers have also declined. So this information has been provided to me by one of our St. Louis County reps, and so I'm hoping to get some updated data in regards to our RSV numbers as well as our influenza numbers. We currently do not track our influenza data in district, but we still track our COVID numbers and report that information out. update. Are there any questions?
Okay, construction update?
Okay, good evening, everyone. Randy is out of town this evening, so I'll be taking care of presenting the construction update. You do have the memo. It's mostly up to date from the version that you looked at last. This changed just slightly. Cold weather has definitely begun to impact the laying of the block and brick outside, especially as we're looking forward in the weather forecast for the following week. We can't do masonry stuff when it's below freezing. We can start the day below freezing, but we have to get above freezing for that mortar to set and begin to cure. So we're watching the weather very carefully. We had 2 rainout days that impacted us. Today we were able to get through. Tomorrow we'll be able to get through, but as the temperatures drop, it's going to become more and more challenging. So this is the portion of the year that we are most concerned about when it comes to building A. However, all that being said, it's not all gloom and doom. I walk the site every morning with Ryan Smith, the job superintendent. We are actively trying to find ways, TRICO, along with our partnership, trying to find ways to accelerate gain schedule any way possible. So our latest strategy is, now that we're 50% done with the block wall on the south-facing side of Building A, we're hoping to start bringing steel in and setting that. Now, that does require a little bit of arm twisting from the masons because they don't like to work around steel, but I don't care. We'll get them in there. But that's one of our main strategies moving forward, is to overlap the trades. Obviously, we can't put our masons in unsafe situations, but steel can be set below freezing while masonry can't. So I'm fairly confident we'll be able to pick up some time from the back end of the schedule by starting that steel work early. One other thing, he and I have identified another possible change that we're running by the structural engineers and architects that may pick us up 5 days in the basement of Building A by just changing out some masonry walls with drywall. Unless those are structural, there's no reason why we can't do that, and that'll speed us up quite a bit down there. One significant change financially that I need to mention is we have now begun the value engineering portion of this project, where we're looking at all the upcoming work to look for ways that we can extract additional value out of some of the things that are intended. So we did identify one that will net us about $90,000 in return. By just changing the finishes for a stairwell in Building A from terrazzo and glass rail to rubber treads and steel rail. At this point in the project, considering the budget and the schedule, I feel like that's the best use of taxpayer money, is to downgrade that slightly. We were shocked to see the overall price savings that we would net from that change, so that change was a no-brainer. I'm not really interested in the nickel and dime changes, so we're looking for big ones. There's a couple more that we are, as soon as I hear from the engineers, mechanical engineers, we may be able to get about another $20,000 out of some ductwork changes. So those are the types of things we're looking for, those big dollar items that just slight changes in either the plan or the materials will net us some change. So the budget is, I won't read those numbers to you, but we are into and past the contingencies. We're still okay on the budget, but we will continue to try and extract every dollar we can and find every savings that we can to keep this thing moving forward.
Thank you. Any questions? Our favorite part, A. The video.
There it is. Good evening, board. Nothing too dramatic tonight. It never is. Just a few odds and ends. So, as has been reported, all of the east back restrooms are functional, but this is the far west side. And the process of rehabbing those restrooms begins with getting all the fixtures off the walls, and that's what they were doing just a few days ago.
about 2 weeks ago in this very space. The good folks from Color Art were here. We have to, of course, be very intentional about the furnishings for all of the new spaces in Building A. In attendance were, among other people, Mr. Harcharik and Nurse Goldberg, seen here, who are both going to be enjoying new spaces. Nurse Goldberg especially, because I just wanted you to see where she is. If you haven't been down there before, she's in tight quarters, and I know for a fact that she's really eager to move into her new space. And she had a splinter and is eager to be on the board video. You may have noticed when you came in, we have the new swipe pad right outside the R&D door here. It's convenient while also maintaining our expected level of security. You can see the signage. Kind of a striking scene over in the construction area. That's the elevator shaft. And I just thought it would be cool to show you that. Let's take a quick stroll through the teen kitchen. A lot of stuff's going on there. They had sweet potato pie baking. Maybe you saw some of our social media videos. So it's highly functional, not fully functional, but it is one great, impressive space that's getting a lot of use. So. And finally, the vestibule is beginning to look like a vestibule for the middle school. Glass is in, and the new sign is especially impressive at night, I thought. So I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sure.
You're getting videos at night, that means you're working too many hours.
I didn't take that picture. Thank you.
Thank you. Fiscal year 23, November financial statements.
Yes, ma'am. Here it is. Well, it appears that my computer does not want to recognize the display, so I apologize to our guests, but I am not able to present this. If someone else would like to do it for me, that is connected to the smartboard. Otherwise, I will just continue from mine. Okay, so this is a summary, operating revenue. Note that 86% of our revenue does come from local sources, which includes our fee-based programs like preschool and our school lunch, breakfast and lunch program, but mostly from local taxes. So we have to make special note that our community is in strong support of our school district and very generous with their tax dollars. So we try and respect that, much like the change I mentioned earlier. Revenue right now, we're at right around $3 million, or about 11% of the budget. Our first tax receipts will be deposited. We just got those, I believe, on Tuesday. So it's always a good day when you get just about $6 million deposited in your bank account. So that did happen. So now every month we'll be receiving those tax receipts through the end of the year. Of course, protested taxes, that's another thing. Those payments by law have to be impounded. And all of our local corporations, our larger ones, do protest their taxes. Those all go into escrow and sit there until the friendly lawsuit orders the county collector to release those funds to us. We don't get those until June. So it's always a bit of a stressful moment while we're waiting May, June, waiting for those to come in. However, we do have cash reserves sufficient in order to get through that period of time. So I'm not concerned about that at all. There were days that we were. Expenditures were about 78% devoted to salaries, which is an investment in our people. Yeah, just one more there, Veneer. Thank you. Oh, Chris. I won't read these slides to you, but things are tracking as expected on the salaries and benefits side through November. Athletic budgets, this is a carryover from last month. That is the changes in our sports offerings is the primary change for those increases. We're about 33% of the budget right now, and right about where we would expect to be this time of the year, remembering that's also inclusive of our bond funds. So this is slightly inflated as a result of that. The overall impact of everything that I just said results in a 42.4% budgeted fund balance for this fiscal year. We do anticipate bringing a budget amendment to true up our federal revenues and expenses next month. Any questions?
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Okay, calendar of events. We've got senior capstone nights, the 19th and the 20th. Joe's Place board meeting on the 21st. Also senior capstone night that night. December 27th, board candidate filing closes. And then a board work session on January 5th. Another Joe's Place meeting on the 18th, the day before our next board meeting. Is there anything else on the calendar that anyone wants to address or put out? Okay. Committee reports. Are there any committees that have a report?
I have, I attended the SED, meeting on the 6th, so, and I got it in Google Docs, thank you, Kat. And I just highlighted some of what they talked about, the tax, mainly focused and talked about the 4 areas, you know, parent and voice, equity and spacing, compliance and equity, and understanding IEP, and want to make sure that participating districts are following those 4 areas, really communicating with the whole circle that involve the student with IEP. Because some districts are not communicating and staff don't know what's going on, parents don't know what's going on. And then they kind of talked about their strategic planning and CSIP, and the data they're using and how they're really working on that, and they're up to date as far as their strategy. And I meant to put the YouTube link on the doc, and you guys get a chance to watch it. The meeting was really great. I just tried to capture what was important. And so that's pretty much for the special school district. And as far as wellness committee, we have our dates on the calendar where we will be starting meeting.
Excellent.
I also had, I did not fill out the Google Doc because I didn't fill out the Google Doc. So we had a calendar committee meeting, our first calendar committee meeting, thanks to our team of assistant suits for guiding the work. It was the first of what they're hoping could be 3, possibly 4, hopefully not more than that, meetings. And really what it was a deep dive, the beginning of a deep dive of education for the committee members of how policy regulation, the impact of DESE, and others have on the building of the calendar. And it's not just that you start looking at holiday break and go forward and backwards.
Right.
And so I think it's a really important time to do that because a lot of, well, first of all, people are very forgetful, right? And even though we haven't had a lot of turnover on the committee, there's still so many elements to a district calendar that I think it's a good time to stop. Let's go back to the very beginning and then see what opportunities we learn from this education of where we might be able to pivot, change, or is this going to look a lot like what it's looked like in the past, even talking about the equity in minutes at building levels as well. So with that being said, there's a lot of more work to do. We need to appoint another committee, another board member to this committee, and soon, because I'm unable to make the January meeting. I will be traveling. And I think now is that time, since I will not be serving on this committee after my term is up. I think now's the time to get in and learn, because you're doing a wonderful thing of starting from scratch.
And I'm happy to orient anyone and catch them up. Our next meeting is January 10th at 4 p.m. in this very room, for those of you who are checking your social calendars. And January 12th is our next steering committee for our strategic plan, just as a heads up.
Thank you for that. Any other updates from any other committees?
scheduled for this room. Esports had an event, and then also an ACT activity in Mr. Day's room. So that meeting will be rescheduled for January.
Right, I didn't have it on mine, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Danny and I are the assigned board reps for that one. I don't recall, but maybe I can.
It might be another one of those notes that someone else needs to.
Well, can we check and just make sure that they're on the list to get the notification?
Yes. So it sounds like we need to do a reevaluation of committee assignments mid-year to respond to.
I think we could do that. Yep. I'll send out an email, start that conversation. Okay, candidate filing update. I believe we have 2 candidate filings, is there, or 3? And one of them is our Katie. So how exciting. As I stated before, the filing closes on the 27th, so good luck to everyone. I think we'll skip 604 and then just go to action items. Can I get an amendment to the agenda? Okay, 604, board member resignation. We've got one of our board members who, do you want to address us?
I think it's in the letter.
It is in the letter.
It's been an honor serving with you all. Thank you so much for giving me a chance and investing so much time in me. I definitely intended to certainly continue for the rest of this term through April, but also, was hoping to serve for longer than that. Family is moving out of state, and so it will be an option. So, very bittersweet for me and for my family. I appreciate the whole community and how we have been able to participate over the last 14 years. So,
Well, we're grateful for you and your service. And we're waiting on somebody else.
Congratulations on your big.
Yes.
Congratulations, great move.
It's been a real pleasure to serve with you. Okay, construction change orders.
Move to approve change orders 26 and 27 as presented. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Board policies, personnel shift updates, AC, ACA, you know.
I move to approve policies AC, ACA, CHCA, HEAA, IGBCA, IGBE, and IGBH as modified.
Awesome. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. New course proposal, creativity and technology.
I move to approve the new course proposal, creativity and technology as presented. Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Audited financial statements.
Move to approve the FY '22 audited financial statements as presented. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Standpoint Consultative Services.
I move to approve the modified proposal for Standpoint Consulting Services not to exceed $15,000.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board member resignation. I move to approve.
I move to approve the board member resignation as presented. Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
What happens if we all oppose?
Right.
Do you just have to stay with us? Thank you. executive session?
And
One last time.
I move to enter executive session in accordance with section 610.021, subsections 2, 3, 9, and 13, and section 610.022 of the revised statutes of Missouri on December 15th, 2022, for the following specific reasons.